I understand that I made a short a while ago about the American dream now, which I think it's a good short answer to what I think is the American dream. But I'm going to tell you guys what the American dream was. All right, for anyone that may or may not know, doesn't live in the United States like I do. However, let's get right into it. So, the American dream was you own a house, you have the white picket fence, you have a wife, you have kids, you have a good paying job, and it seemed that that was the dream. That was a dream back then, and it sounds nice on paper. On the other hand, that's not what it's like today. Dating is more difficult. Things are more expensive. Owning a house is pretty much a fantasy at this point. Hell, even renting an apartment seems like a fantasy at this point. You hear people that live in RVs. You hear about people living in storage units, hotels. But yet, the older generation, not all, but most, are questioning, oh man, why aren't people dating anymore? Why aren't people having kids? Which I've touched about in my previous video about why I don't want kids. Well, just look around. Everything is more expensive. Childcare is more expensive. Again, housing's expensive. Groceries are expensive. Insurance is expensive. The job market is uncertain because of AI. And it seemed that the 2020 pandemic really has changed the dynamic of the landscape, I guess. I don't know how else to describe it. So, what is the new American dream now? To me personally, the new American dream is not to live out on the street and have some kind of meal in your stomach now. That's the new American dream. And I don't know how we're going to be able to change this. I don't know. I have no idea. But it just seems like it just sucks nowadays. The American dream, people can just scoff at it and laugh about it. Oh man, okay, yeah, okay. We'll be able to own a house with a white picket fence, have a dog, have kids, have a significant other. But those things seem to be out of reach for most people. And it just seems like also we all know that the middle class is shrinking. The the amount of lower class and the amount of higher class is expanding, right? It seemed that everything was, I wouldn't say balanced, but more reasonable. But it seems that the lower class and the higher class are growing more and more. And the middle class is getting compressed more and more and more. And after 2020, or during 2020, during the pandemic, there was the biggest transfer of wealth in history. It's not debated, it's fact. Because during COVID, small businesses or businesses that aren't essential have just shut down and have had a very hard time recovering. But places like Walmart, McDonald's, like the big chains, they were fine. They were okay. They didn't really have to worry about it. They're too big to fail. And it just seems that someone that wants to have their own business have their own small business, it won't happen because we know that small businesses, they're pricier. They're not as cheap as, Walmart, where you can get something that's a nickel, but I don't think that's going to happen anymore because of inflation. And speaking of inflation, I know that this isn't a big deal, but there's also no dollar menu anymore at a fast food joint. Fast food places, no longer cheap. They're now expensive. You hear people talk about how ludicrous, a burger, a fries, and a Coke costs at McDonald's. You hear people complain about Chili's being expensive. So even going out to eat, even at a fast food joint, is a financial decision. And trying to have fun nowadays, trying to get some entertainment, everything is kind of a subscription model. You hear about companies just nickel and dime everything. Cars, vehicles, getting a used vehicle is also expensive. Can't get that cheap Toyota Camry anymore. Can't get that. So how are people supposed to get to work? How are people that aren't as fortunate supposed to go to work? Oh, they can take a bus or a train. Okay, but to me personally, I would rather have my own transportation, and that's even an issue. Like you can't go anywhere. You can't really be able to go places without having a car in the United States. Can't have that. It just doesn't seem possible. Walking somewhere doesn't seem possible. You have to have a car. Another thing to add on is the education system. Gen Alpha, you hear stories about Gen Alpha can't read. How is that possible? So we're spending so much money on our education, but yet kids can't read. They have tablets in schools now. And I can't necessarily blame the schools because it's also the parents' responsibility. Even though it is a busier kind of landscape that we have now. People have to work 2 or 3 jobs just to survive and have, I don't know how many side hustles, because your wage that was good before the pandemic, good a few years before this year, isn't the same as this year. It just isn't. And another thing that I want to point out that's an issue is relationships. And it's not just romantic relationships either. It's also friendships. It's also the lack of community, I guess. People are just glued to their phones. Before the cell phone, before the smartphone, I don't hate the smartphone. I don't hate cell phones. I use mine every day. When I'm looking up topics that I'm curious about, or I use it to use AI to help me find computer parts for my computer because I want to upgrade my graphics card in my computer, right? That's an example, right? But let me get back to what I was talking about. What's the point of going outside and meeting your neighbor if you can just do that in the comfort of your own home? Like, what's the point of going to a park and meeting someone if you can just go on Facebook or go on a dating app and meet people there? There just doesn't seem to be any third spaces, or third spaces don't have that strong presence anymore. Malls are a good example. They're shutting down. Because what's the point of going to a mall and buying something if you can just go on Amazon, go on the app, purchase it, wait for it to be delivered. So, yeah, that's my opinion about the American dream. And George Carlin has said this, and I may or may not butcher his quote, but the American dream only exists if you're asleep. You have to be asleep to believe it. So, yeah, anyways, guys, that's been it for this video. And before I end this video, I don't hate this country. I love this country. I'm glad that I was born here. You know, there are good points of America, you know, free speech, and, you know, I'm not in a war-torn country or anything. We have some type of infrastructure still. But I think it's good to also address the issues about something that you cherish and love. Alright, guys. If you want to like, sub, favorite, if you want to comment below what you think about the American dream, and I am out.